The DevSec 2023 podcast, sponsored by our good friends at Cisco. I'm Alan Dale. This is my good buddy Jerry Carew. We are Gale Force Winds. Jess, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing here at DevSec.
Perfect, thank you. Well, thank you for having me on. My name's Jess Chapman. I run a company called Ethree, which supports businesses dealing with all that tough people stuff at work. And that's what I was here to do at the conference. We're having a panel around how small businesses can build competitive workplaces and find the talent that they need to grow and scale. So I was part of a panel on that topic.
E3, what's that stand for?
Engage, enable, empower. So the things that you need to do if you want to find great people and keep them, which is obviously what gives you that competitive edge.
You know, one of the great people in this room, in this trade show, is Victoria Belbin of Acada, a true leader in this space and has led other organizations before that. She tells me you're responsible for bringing her here.
Some of that. So part of what we do is help organizations recruit talent and ensure fit. So I was part of the process, along with many other people, to identify the right ED for the association. So yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you found the right person for the right job at the right time. Well done. So tell me now, were you just giving a keynote, or were you part of a panel?
It was a panel, so 4 people who are experts in the HR space, and then Victoria was the moderator of the panel. So, yeah.
Right. Tell me about the panel. Tell me about the discussion that was had.
So we had an individual, I think you've met Stephanie, she's the founder of Diversity NL, so she was there to talk about the wonderful world of diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, which is really important in today's world. And then we had 2 other ladies, Janice from KBRS and Sally from MC Advisory, who were also sharing their expertise. So each of us has been working with Acada in a different way to provide programming for small businesses that can help them tackle that tough people stuff at work. So whether it's the diversity, whether it's recruitment, whether it's leadership, whatever it happens to be, we're there to provide expert resources and guidance in those topics.
You know, it really is a struggle to find top talent, to encourage people to join your company, your sector. What are some real interesting tips and tricks you've learned along the way that can help them?
So right now, interestingly, the statistics from Gallup say in Canada, 74% of people think it's a good time to find a new job. So you've got to be thinking about not just how you find the talent, but also how you keep your talent. And in terms of like finding good talent, we often think that we can just post a position and everybody's going to know about our organization and everybody's going to think it's fantastic and apply. But a lot of the time today, people are waiting for you to go to them. So we call passive recruitment. They're sitting there on LinkedIn and other places. They're not necessarily actively looking for a job, but if somebody came knocking on the door, they would consider it. So even smaller businesses want to think about how do they get past the kind of traditional routes to recruitment and start using their network to find the talent that might be interested in their organization, even if didn't know they exist. So that's the first thing. And then don't lose sight of who you've got already, right? So sometimes we overlook the talent that we could grow, thinking that we can go buy talent because it's faster, but actually you'll build more retention, which is cheaper for the organization in the long run if you can grow your people over time.
And tips around retention, what do those look like?
So we actually talked about this a bit this morning on the panel. So we talked about what I call passion and purpose. So the newer generations coming into work, they want something quite different than what a lot of us have built, right? So sometimes it can be challenging to identify how do I engage people, how do I get them excited in my business? But it comes down to purpose and passion. What is your business doing that somebody can connect to? How do they see themselves in your organization and see, I'm excited by what we're doing? And that might not actually be what your business does. It might be how your business connects with the community or your social responsibility or the quality of your team, right? But you're trying to find things that somebody can be really passionate about so that when they go out and talk about their job, they're not talking about the paycheck, they're talking about the value they see from the organization.
You know, I immediately think of Simon Sinek's great conversation around why.
Yes.
That resonated with me the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
I often revisit it sometimes when I need motivation myself. Speaks almost identical to what you just said.
It does, and the trick in today's world is that we often talk to other people about what we think is important. So part of my background is neuroscience, how your brain works. So we often think if it matters to us, it's going to matter to everybody else. But actually the newer generations have very different ideas about the why and what the why should be. So the trick is to be able to ask them what's important to them and connect them to your business. It might be things that you would never have thought of it being interesting, but if that's what gets them excited, that's what people they're going to go out and talk about and refer people to. So it's important to make that connection for them.
Jess, earlier you talked about passive recruitment and utilizing your network. Tell me what that would look like, because big networks are built in events like this, and a lot of people spend years and years and years fostering relationships and the like.
Yes.
Tell me the importance of that network.
Well, as far as we're concerned, business runs on people and relationship. The better your people perform, the better your business performs. So everything is about how connected people are. Your network's important for business development, but it's also important for talent recruitment, and you don't know who's out there. So right now we have a vacancy and I'm looking, but before I posted, the first thing I did was went out to a bunch of different people in my world who touch different organizations, different sectors, and said, hey, this is what we're offering, this is the kind of person that I'm looking for. Do you know anybody you want to forward my information on? Reach out into your world, and that way I might reach people who wouldn't normally think of us or consider our organization. So you never know who in your network might bring you the next talent that you need.
Jess, we've had interesting byproducts of our podcast as it relates to recruiting. People have gotten jobs because of conversations that we've had, and they've shared the conversation. Is video important in job searches now?
I think it is. The world has gone virtual, right? So we're still having the debate about how virtual we want to be, but your ability to communicate and connect with somebody across a screen is more important than ever before. And the trick is that when you communicate with somebody, only a small portion of what you convey comes from your words. Most of it is your tone of voice and your body language. So being able to make the same connection through a screen that you would make face-to-face with someone is a really important and valuable skill. So showing that you can do that is probably going to get you further up the choice ladder for your career path.
How much recruitment happens on Zoom, for example?
A lot now, at least first interview. So you'll probably do more than one interview in an interview process, but quite often the screening interview is done virtually. And how you show up and what you wear still matters. We'd like to think it doesn't, but it does, right? The backdrop, the room that you choose to be in, all of those things say I can navigate the nuances of this environment, which is now where work takes place.
Yeah, navigate the nuances of the environment. I mean, it's so much can be lost in just a resume and a job ad.
Yeah.
Right? And this hiring is a relationship thing, right? And you want to get it right because
it's very costly if you don't.
It's very costly if you don't, right? And the importance of nuance, and as we speak here now, watching your eyes and how passionate you are, these are all, you all mean things, right? That's so very important. How do people, I find now, it's still very traditional. There's people putting out job ads and there's people applying, and it's still a very traditional thing. Do you think that's changing?
I think it is, and we talked about that a little bit this morning on the panel too. But I think we have to be realistic, right? So people don't start businesses to have a team of people. The team is a part of having a business, and so if we make this stuff too complicated or there's lots for somebody to think about, we don't have a lot of time, right? So I think it will change. I think it is changing, but it needs to happen in small pieces. So if you're trying to figure out how you're more inclusive in your recruitment or how you get more in touch with the technology of what we're doing today, picking one thing, right? Like picking a change to your recruitment process. Maybe you start taking names off resumes when you screen them, so you'll be more inclusive that way. Maybe you start doing a first interview on Zoom so you can practice that skill set. But the more that we think about doing those things, the more successful business will be at finding the talent that they want.
Inclusivity,
yes,
is such an important thing right now, that everybody feels they belong in that space that they're in. Any tips on how we achieve that?
The most simple thing I can say is talk to your people, and it sounds really simple, but actually creating space for that can be tricky. But we do assume that people operate like us, right? So we assume I'm like this, therefore you must be like that too, and actually no two brains are the same. So going out, having a conversation with somebody, asking about them, what they're passionate about, what they need from you, and having that conversation becomes just the simplest way of including somebody properly. And if you're a business owner, you've got more than 30, 35 people, you need to start training your leaders to do that, because you can't touch everybody in the same way anymore, right? You can't have all those personal relationships in quite the same way, so you need your leaders in your team to be actioning that for you.
Leaders is a thing I'd like to focus on for a moment. You must do a lot of consulting to leaders and help them through this whole complicated process. Talk to me about that and your leadership development.
So we do a couple of different things in that space. So we do a lot of like one-to-one consulting. So often we work with a lot of CEOs and senior leaders who will call us when they have a people thing, whatever that looks like, and we can provide that one-to-one support. But we also do a lot of leadership training, and specifically in helping leaders deal with people. So we don't necessarily teach strat planning and finance. We can do that, but really our focus is on helping leaders understand leading people in today's more complicated world.
Wow. And that's a very important piece, right? Because people often don't leave jobs.
No, they leave leaders. Yeah.
They leave leaders, right?
Yeah.
And getting that piece right is it's a pure cost saving for your company, because if you don't have to keep going through this process, it's money saving.
Yeah, actually the US Department of Labor says it costs you 140% of someone's annual salary to replace them.
Wow.
Right, that's a lot of
That's
money.
a huge investment.
Yeah.
I've got a question around
Yes.
resumes.
Yes.
I've been in digital marketing for decades. Why does anyone need a resume? LinkedIn is a powerful tool. I'm struggling with why you need a resume. Can you explain that to me?
So I think it's a fair challenge, but I would still say from an inclusion perspective, it levels the playing field. Right? So there will be some people who aren't on LinkedIn. There will be some people for who that's an uncomfortable place to be, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't necessarily be a brilliant employee. So having everybody submit their information in more or less the same format, more or less the same specification, kind of levels the playing field. So I do like it from that perspective. If you wanted to go down the path of saying we pass on resumes and LinkedIn is the way we want to go, all I'd say to that was be mindful if somebody comes back and says I don't have a LinkedIn profile, how you might accommodate that in your process.
Interesting.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Great answer for sure. The other thing I want to talk about, I'm sorry, I think we're kind of geeking out on this stuff, but the other thing that I wanted to speak about was one thing we used to describe years ago were soft skills and hard skills. We use these terms. I've kind of taken my own approach to flipping it on its head, and I call them permanent skills and perishable skills, and I consider the permanent skills things like an ability to communicate, an understanding of lifelong learning, an ability to work effectively within a team and leadership, things like that, where I find the perishable skills are the more technical skills. If you're a mechanical engineer, you have to relearn additive manufacturing by the time you start school and finish school. That's a very perishable skill. But at one time that was a hard skill and a soft skill.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the importance of those skill sets.
Well, so it's funny, I refer to them as technical and professional skills, right? Because again, the problem with soft skills is everyone goes, oh, that's the HR fluffy stuff, right? And then we're not paying attention to it. But I'd love someone to appoint to a job today and say, look, this is a job that doesn't require you to be good with people. Like I don't think there is one that exists, right? Your ability to connect with people, have good conversation, influence stakeholders, manage the nuances, which we were talking about, is actually becoming increasingly important because people are more diverse in the workplace than they ever were before. So we talk about emotional intelligence, right? Your EQ, that is a bigger predictor of your success, particularly in a leadership position, than your intellect or your IQ would be. And it's all about, can you navigate people dynamics? Do you understand you? Do you understand the other person? Can you tailor and adapt to who that person is? And so when we work with organizations, we're trying to build that EQ in the entirety of the workforce.
Do you measure that through personality tests and the like? Yeah?
You can. I mean, so personality might hesitate. So we do a lot of work with personality. Personality is great. Personality tools are great for creating a language. We just need to be careful that we don't pigeonhole people based on it, right? Because your personality preferences and your behavior are not the same thing. So somebody always chooses how they're showing up. It's just that they have these drivers of how they show up, like their personality, that will inform their decision when they're not thinking about it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Fascinating conversation, I have to tell you, wasn't it?
Well, we're only 14 minutes in. I think we could go for another hour.
We really could. I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed your perspective, and it's so topical, particularly this defense sector. They're looking for people, top talent.
Yes.
Very important.
And often more traditional, right?
And and often more traditional, that's right. But I tell you the other thing is that Jerry and I have had the great pleasure of being in a lot of conversations. Everybody is having the same conversation. They're all looking for talent.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's a great time to be looking for a job. But I guess you've got to be very clever about the direction that you go. Thank you so much for your conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.